Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome back to CashFlow Lab. Today we're diving into something, well, it's pretty huge. It's this bold, maybe even audacious claim floating around global finance. We've got a stack of sources, yeah, pointing towards this idea that the US might be planning a kind of subtle reset of its national debt. We're talking $37 trillion here.
Staggering number.
Exactly. And the kicker, the idea is they might use crypto and stablecoins to do it. So this is our deep dive. The $37 trillion crypto debt reset.
Mm-hmm.
Our mission today really is to get into the weeds with the source material. We've basically got two very different proposals on the table for how the U.S. can manage or maybe, manipulate its balance sheet.
And both are pretty high stakes.
Totally. And we need to figure out why this is suddenly such a big deal, why everyone from senior Russian advisors to tech billionaires are talking about it in geopolitical terms.
It's crucial context, isn't it? That $37 trillion figure. It's not just debt, it's like this huge weight on the whole global economy. And it really forces the U.S. to think creatively, maybe even radically, about financial survival.
Right.
So these plans we're looking at, they sound pretty out there, maybe, but they represent these digital pathways the U.S. could take, ways to handle this massive debt without outright default or total economic meltdown.
Okay, so break down these two theories for us.
Right. So theory one, let's call it the Russian warning. This comes directly from Anton Kobyakov. He's a senior advisor to President Putin, been in that role for well over a decade.
Okay, so a serious source.
Definitely. And his claim is pretty blunt. He says the U.S. is basically plotting to shift its $37 trillion debt into what he calls a crypto cloud.
A crypto cloud? What does that even mean?
Well, using dollar-pegged stablecoins seems to be the mechanism he's pointing at. The end game, according to him. Export inflation globally, devalue the debt, and leave everyone else holding the bag.
Ouch. Okay, that's theory one. What's the alternative?
Theory two is almost the polar opposite in approach. We're calling it the Bitcoin strategy. This one comes from Michael Saylor, the big Bitcoin proponent.
Ah, Saylor. Yeah, heard of him.
Right. His advice, given publicly to the previous administration, was pretty aggressive. He basically said, dump all the U.S. gold reserves, take that money and buy Bitcoin.
Wow. Seriously, dump the gold.
Yep. The idea was to massively recapitalize the U.S., boost the balance sheet, and at the same time kind of economically kneecap rivals by crashing the asset they hold, gold.
Okay, two very different strategies. One, subtle inflation export, the other, full-on economic warfare.
Exactly.
So the big question for you, the listener, and for us today is, how real are these plans? Is this just, geopolitical posturing, trying to sow distrust in the dollar?
Or is there something genuinely plausible here? Is this maybe the only way out for a country with that much debt?
And what does it all mean for trust? Trust in the dollar, trust in these new digital assets. That's what we need to figure out.
Okay, let's dig into that first theory then. The Russian advisor, Kobyakov. Where exactly did he say this stuff?
Yeah, so the source is specific. These comments were made at the Eastern Economic Forum, which is a pretty significant event held in Russia. It's where they often signal policy direction, especially towards Asia and the Pacific.
Got it. And Kobyakov, you said he's advised Putin for over 10 years.
That's right. So he's not just some random commentator. His words carry weight, representing a certain perspective within the Russian establishment.
And what was his exact claim again? Something about rewriting the rules?
Precisely. He alleged the U.S. is trying to rewrite the rules of the gold and crypto markets. And the goal, as he framed it, is to push the world into this crypto cloud. His term move, that massive $37 trillion debt onto digital assets like stablecoins.
And then pull the rug out, devalue it.
Essentially, yeah. Devalue it to,
Wow.
as he put it, wipe the slate clean of the real burden of that debt. Okay, wipe the slate clean. That sounds drastic. But you mentioned this isn't exactly a new idea, just maybe a new method.
What's fascinating here is...
Right.
Yes, exactly. Kobyakov's using modern lingo, crypto cloud, but he's describing something ancient. Monetary debasement. It's one of the oldest tricks in the financial playbook.
Debasement? Okay, clarify that. How is that different from just defaulting, not paying your bills?
Crucial distinction. Defaulting is saying, nope, we're not paying you back. That's instant financial death. Total loss of credibility. Catastrophic.
Right. Avoid at all costs?
Absolutely. Devaluation, though. It's much sneakier, more politically survivable. It means you do pay the debt back, every single dollar, nominally.
Oh, okay.
But the dollars you use to pay it back by way less real value than the dollars you originally borrowed. You've paid the number, but you've crushed the purchasing power.
So you've lowered the real weight of the debt through inflation, basically.
Exactly, through engineered inflation or manipulating the currency's value.
Can you give us that analogy again? The $100 bill one. I think that helps make it concrete.
Sure. Let's imagine, just for simplicity, the entire world's usable money supply is just one $100 bill.
Yeah.
Okay. The U.S., as the reserve currency issuer, borrows that $100. Now they owe $100. Simple enough.
Got it.
But here's where the superpower comes in, the ability to issue the world's money. Instead of, say, taxing its citizens or building more factories to earn the $100 back, the U.S. just prints another $100 bill, creates it out of thin air.
Poof. Now there's $200 floating around.
Exactly. But, and this is key, the amount of actual stuff in the world hasn't changed. Same amount of oil, grain, houses, labor, everything. The real economy is the same size.
Okay. I see where this is going. More money chasing the same amount of stuff means.
Inflation. Prices have to adjust. That loaf of bread that cost $1 now costs $2. The gallon of gas, same deal. Everything doubles in price because the money supply doubled, but the real value didn't.
So when the U.S. pays back the original $100,
They've technically fulfilled their obligation. The lender gets their $100 back. But that $100 now only buys half of what it could buy when they first lent it out.
wow. So they got paid back, but they effectively lost half the value. The debt got devalued.
Precisely. That's monetary debasement used as a debt management tool. It's subtle, it's slow sometimes, but it works.
And you're saying this has happened before? It's not just a theory?
Oh, absolutely. History is littered with examples. Think about after World War II, massive war debts were basically inflated away over time across many countries.
Right, I've heard about that.
Then you had the really high inflation of the 1970s, the Great Inflation, same principle. And more recently, think about all the money created after the 2008 crisis, and especially after the pandemic started in 2020.
Yeah, QE, stimulus check.
All that liquidity sloshing around, where did it go? Asset prices went nuts. Housing, stocks, even used cars suddenly got incredibly expensive. That's the $100 analogy playing out in real time. That pain you felt trying to buy a house in 2021, that was the consequence.
So Kobyakov's warning. He's basically saying the U.S. is likely to do what it's always done to handle huge debt, but this time the printing press is digital.
Yeah.
It's stablecoins.
That's the core argument, yes. Same strategy, new technology. Inflate the currency, shrink the real value of the debt. The stablecoin mechanism just makes it potentially more global, perhaps more efficient from their perspective.
Okay, that leads us right into the next bit then. If regular inflation, like the kind we saw recently, hits people at home first, how do stablecoins change that? How do they push the problem out to the rest of the world, as Kobyakov suggests?
Right. This is where the mechanism gets really interesting. It's about distribution and maybe masking the source.
So it's not like the U.S. Treasury is going to literally swap $37 trillion for, I don't know, tenor.
No, not directly like that. It's much more subtle. The focus is on dollar-pegged stablecoins. Think USDC, USDT, maybe future regulated ones. These are tokens that claim a one-to-one value with the U.S. dollar.
And they're supposedly backed by real dollars or, more often, U.S. government debt, right? Like Treasury bills.
Exactly. Usually short-term U.S. treasuries. So the stablecoin itself is just a digital claim check. The value is tied to the underlying dollar assets held in reserve.
Okay, so if the value of the underlying dollar assets gets inflated away,
Bingo. Then the value of the stablecoin, its purchasing power, drops right along with it. And because these stablecoins are used globally,
the inflation gets exported instantly to anyone holding them, wherever they are.
precisely, it addresses a key political problem for the U.S. government,
Which is?
domestic backlash. When the Fed prints money traditionally, or the government spends massively, Americans feel it pretty quickly. Gas prices, groceries, rent, CPI reports go up, people get angry, and politicians feel the heat.
Yeah, nobody likes high inflation.
But with stablecoins, think about who uses them. Yes, some Americans, but huge adoption is happening overseas. In developing countries, places with unstable currencies, for international trade, remittances.
So a lot of the users are outside the U.S. political system.
Correct. And as global demand for these dollar stablecoins grows, what do the issuers, like Circle, Tether, have to do? They have to buy more reserves, which means they buy more U.S. dollars and, critically, more short-term U.S. Treasury debt.
So the global adoption of stablecoins creates automatic continuous demand for U.S. government debt. It helps fund the U.S. deficit.
It creates this powerful, self-reinforcing loop. More stablecoin use equals more demand for treasuries, which helps the U.S. finance its debt. It's quite elegant, in a way.
So just to spell it out, if you're someone in, say, Argentina or Vietnam using USDC to save or do business, They're indirectly funding the U.S. government.
You are indirectly holding a digital IOU backed by U.S. debt. You've become a tiny financier for that $37 trillion structure, probably without even realizing it.
Uh-oh. Okay.
And here's the cruel geniuses part from the U.S. perspective. If they then decide to inflate the dollar to reduce the real value of that $37 trillion debt,
The pain, the loss of purchasing power isn't just felt in the U.S.
it's immediately shared by every single person holding those stablecoins worldwide. Inflation becomes like this global tax, automatically collected through the digital dollar system.
A shared tax. That's a powerful way to put it.
Yeah.
And it lessens the political blowback at home.
Significantly.
Yeah.
You achieve the debt reduction goal, but you've spread the negative consequences far and wide, mostly onto people who can't vote you out of office.
Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting, right? The neutrality aspect. These things aren't issued by the Fed or the Treasury, usually.
Exactly. They're issued by private companies. Circle, Tether, Paxos. This gives them a veneer of being, neutral tech platforms, not instruments of U.S. government policy.
Which makes them easier to adopt globally. Less political baggage.
Absolutely. It's psychologically easier for someone in another country, maybe even a rival country, to use a stablecoin from a private company than something explicitly branded as a U.S. government digital dollar.
Yep.
It avoids the immediate association with the Fed's policies or potential U.S. sanctions.
And there's regulation coming that might shape this. You mentioned a Genius Act concept.
Yeah, that's informal terminology some sources use, but it points to proposed frameworks, like the stablecoin bills discussed in Congress. The idea is that only approved, heavily regulated entities could issue these dollar-backed stablecoins.
So maybe banks, trust companies, perhaps even big tech firms.
Potentially. The framework could allow, say, an Apple or a Meta down the line to issue their own regulated Apple dollar or Metacoin.
Oh, so like a CBDC, a central bank digital currency, but outsourced?
Kind of. It achieves the widespread distribution the government might want, leveraging the tech giants' user bases, but without the negative CBDC brand and all the fears about direct government surveillance and control that come with it.
So the government sets the rules, approves the issuers, oversees the reserves, but the private sector handles the front end, the global rollout.
That seems to be the strategic logic. It gives the U.S. government ultimate control. They can still influence the value, regulate the reserves, potentially freeze things if needed, but it maintains that crucial layer of private sector deniability and distribution efficiency.
Subtle. Very subtle.
Okay.
Okay, let's shift gears completely now. Forget subtle inflation export. Let's talk about the Michael Saylor plan. This sounds way more aggressive.
Oh, it's night and day. Saylor's proposal isn't about slowly devaluing debt. It's about a dramatic, immediate restructuring of the U.S. balance sheet and, frankly, economic warfare.
Remind us of the core instruction he gave.
Simple and brutal. Dump all the U.S. gold and buy Bitcoin.
Seal up Fort Knox.
Pretty much. He even put numbers on it, suggesting the U.S. could acquire something like 5 million Bitcoin, a huge chunk of the total supply for what the U.S. gold reserves were worth at the time.
5 million Bitcoin. That's a lot. What was the strategic thinking there? Why do something so radical?
Saylor laid out a kind of triple threat rationale. It wasn't just about getting Bitcoin. It was about the consequences of the swap itself.
Okay, threat number one.
Crush gold prices. By flooding the market with the massive U.S. gold holdings, the plan was to basically crash the price of gold, effectively demonetizing it as a global reserve asset in one swift move.
Demonetize gold. Okay, why would the U.S. want to do that, besides getting cash for Bitcoin?
That leads directly to the second benefit: harm enemies. Saylor was explicit. He said, our enemies hold gold in their banks. He was clearly talking about countries like Russia and China who have been buying gold hand over fist for years.
As a hedge against the dollar. Right?
Exactly. So if the U.S. tanks the gold price, the value of those strategic reserves held by rivals goes, well, Saylor said, to zero, which is hyperbole, but the value would plummet dramatically.
So it's an economic attack, basically, using markets to weaken adversaries without firing a shot.
That's the idea, a non-military financial decapitation.
Okay, so crash gold, hurt enemies. What's the third benefit? The upside for the U.S.?
Recapitalize America dramatically. The argument is that by swapping gold, which Saylor sees as a dead, passive asset for Bitcoin, which he sees as the future dominant digital monetary network.
The U.S. balance sheet suddenly looks much stronger.
Massively stronger, in his view. He talked about U.S. assets instantly going up to $100 trillion. Again, maybe some hyperbole there, but a huge jump. And critically, the U.S. would then control, or at least have a dominant stake in, both the world's reserve currency network the taller stablecoin system, and the world's premier reserve capital network, Bitcoin.
Wow. Total dominance. That's ambitious.
But hang on, dumping all the gold, isn't that insanely risky? Gold's been money for millennia. Bitcoin is, what, 15 years old and volatile?
That's the massive counter-argument, isn't it? Gold offers stability, history, trust. It's tangible. Bitcoin offers potential, network effects, digital scarcity, but also huge volatility and technological risk.
It seems like a colossal gamble for a nation's reserves.
It absolutely is, and that's probably why, the Saylor plan, the open dump gold by Bitcoin strategy,
Yeah?
it didn't happen. Right. The government even said they wouldn't use taxpayer money to buy Bitcoin directly.
Correct. The idea of an official U.S. Bitcoin reserve was kind of floated, maybe teased, but never acted upon publicly. But that doesn't mean the idea is dead.
Ah, okay. This is where the backdoor strategy comes in, according to the sources.
Exactly. The thinking is, why take the massive political and market risk of doing it openly? Why cause a global panic by crashing gold? Or face huge domestic opposition to buying Bitcoin with public funds?
When you can let someone else do the dirty work first.
Sort of, yeah. You leverage the private sector. Look at MicroStrategy, Saylor's own company. It's become this huge publicly traded proxy for Bitcoin. It just keeps buying and buying at hundreds of thousands of coins.
So MicroStrategy is kind of running the experiment, taking the initial risk, building the stockpile.
They're doing the heavy lifting, as some sources put it. They're innovating, dealing with the accounting, the custody, the market swings, all funded by private capital, not taxpayers.
So the government can just watch and see if it works.
Pretty much. Let the private sector prove the concept, absorb the early volatility, validate Bitcoin as a legitimate treasury reserve asset on a large scale.
And if it does work, if MicroStrategy thrives and Bitcoin becomes seen as strategically vital,
then the government could step in later. There's historical precedent for this. Think back to the early days of the semiconductor industry. The U.S. government saw companies like Intel as strategically critical.
and they took a stake, didn't they? Like 10% ownership in Intel at one point.
Exactly. So fast forward to the future. If MicroStrategy becomes this massive, proven Bitcoin treasury, the U.S. government could, perhaps during a crisis or as a strategic move, take a significant stake in the company or even nationalize parts of it.
So they absorbed the successful private experiment into the state's official reserves.
It's a way to achieve the same goal as Saylor's original plan, securing a large Bitcoin reserve, but without the upfront political explosion and market chaos.
Subtle, gradual, and kind of deniable.
Deniable right up until the moment it becomes official policy. It allows that transition to happen organically, almost, letting the private market pave the way.
Two very different paths, but both seem designed to be less obvious than just defaulting or printing trillions openly.
That seems to be the common thread, finding ways to manage the inescapable debt burden without triggering immediate catastrophic consequences.
Okay, so we have these two potential strategies on the table. The slow bleed of stablecoin inflation export, or the more radical, possibly private-led Bitcoin accumulation.
Right. Two ways the U.S. might try to handle the $37 trillion elephant in the room.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, why are we seeing so many countries, rivals, but also just other nations, seemingly trying to get away from the dollar system? Why are central banks buying physical gold like crazy?
Now we hit the absolute core of it. It boils down to one word: trust. Or rather, the lack of it.
Lack of trust in the U.S.
Lack of trust in U.S. financial promises, specifically. Let's take the stablecoin plan first, even if it's rolled out perfectly. There's a fundamental problem for other countries.
Which is?
The audit problem. Stablecoins like USDC or USDT claim to be backed one-to-one by real dollars or safe U.S. bonds. They publish reports, attestations.
Right, transparency reports.
Yeah, but who performs those audits? Who verifies the reserves? Overwhelmingly, it's U.S.-based accounting firms operating under U.S. regulations.
So if you're China or Russia or even India or Brazil, you just have to take their word for it.
Essentially, yes. You have to trust the issuer, and you have to trust the U.S.-based auditors, and you have to trust the U.S. regulatory system overseeing it all. When you're talking about potentially parking trillions of your national reserves in these things, that's a huge leap of faith.
Especially if you don't fully trust the U.S. government's intentions in the first place.
Precisely. Asking potential adversaries, or even just cautious neutral parties, to rely entirely on U.S.-based verification for the safety of their core reserves. That's a big ask, as the source material puts it. Trust is the scarcest commodity here.
Okay, so the audit trail is shaky from an outside perspective, but let's say, hypothetically, they solve that. Maybe perfect, real-time blockchain audits that everyone could see. Would that fix it?
Not entirely, because there's a deeper, more fundamental risk. It's not just about verifying the reserves are there today. It's about the risk that the U.S. might just change the rules tomorrow.
Ah, like they've done before.
Exactly like they've done before. This brings us right back to the event that haunts international finance. 1971, the Nixon shock.
The gold window closing.
Yes. For decades after World War II, under the Bretton Woods system, the U.S. government explicitly promised the entire world that foreign central banks could redeem their U.S. dollars for physical gold at a fixed rate, $35 an ounce. That promise was the bedrock of global financial stability.
It guaranteed the dollar's value, essentially.
It did. Until August 15th, 1971, when President Nixon went on TV and unilaterally announced, nope, sorry, that deal's off. We're not exchanging dollars for gold anymore.
Just pulled the rug out.
Completely. From the perspective of the rest of the world, it was the ultimate betrayal. The most powerful nation on earth breaking its most fundamental financial promise. The message was clear. Trust our currency, but we reserve the right to change its backing and value whenever it suits us.
So the lesson learned by every other country was
That a trust us token, whether it's a paper dollar guaranteed by gold or a digital stablecoin guaranteed by dollars in a U.S. bank, is only trustworthy until the moment the issuer decides it's not convenient anymore.
there's nothing actually stopping the U.S. from doing the same thing with stablecoins. Freezing assets, changing redemption rules, altering the backing requirements.
Nothing technical, nothing legally binding from an international perspective. History shows that when push comes to shove, national interest, especially for the reserve currency issuer, trumps prior promises. This historical scar is why countries like China, Russia, and many others see physical gold, something you hold in your own vault, outside anyone else's system, as the only truly reliable, censorship-resistant reserve asset.
Okay, so putting it all together. Kobyakov's warning, the stablecoin potential, the Saylor Bitcoin angle. It sounds like the sources believe the U.S. will eventually have to do something like this.
The consensus, or at least the strong assumption reflected in these sources, including Kobyakov's view, is
Yes.
they see it as almost inevitable. The $37 trillion debt isn't going away. Default is unthinkable. Therefore, the U.S. must find a way to manage it.
And these digital avenues offer pathways.
They offer pathways that are subtle, potentially deniable, and leverage the unique position of the U.S. dollar and U.S. innovation. Whether it's exporting inflation via stablecoins or strategically adopting Bitcoin through private proxies, the core assumption is that the U.S. will prioritize its own survival and will likely use these tools to do so. Kobyakov is considered 100% correct in his assumption by some analysts, not necessarily in the precise method, but in the inevitability of the U.S. needing to employ such strategies.
The goal is survival, and these are the modern tools for sovereign financial survival.
And that seems to be the underlying reality driving these predictions. #UTRO.
All right, let's try and wrap this up. We've covered a lot of ground here. We looked at two pretty distinct potential paths for the U.S. dealing with this enormous $37 trillion debt. Path one, the Kobyakov warning. Using seemingly neutral, privately issued stablecoins to basically export inflation, spreading the pain of devaluing the dollar across the globe. Subtle, relies on global adoption.
Right, the slow, steady devaluation route.
Path two, the Saylor strategy. Much more aggressive. Dump gold, buy Bitcoin, possibly using private companies like MicroStrategy as a sort of vanguard, recapitalize the U.S., dominate the digital asset space, and maybe hurt some rivals along the way.
The radical asset swap and economic warfare route.
But the common thread in both. There are ways to manage the debt by shifting the cost, or the liability, or the nature of the assets, leveraging the dollar's global role, but crucially, trying to do it without triggering that immediate catastrophic political or financial meltdown of an open default, or just printing trillions domestically with no disguise.
Exactly. Deniability and subtlety seem key to both strategies.
Okay, so final thought, something for you, the listener, to chew on after this.
Yeah, something that kind of stems from all this talk of inflation and value. If you think about it, the natural state of a healthy economy, one with improving technology and productivity, should probably be deflationary, right? Things should get cheaper over time as we get more efficient.
Makes sense. Better tech, lower costs.
But governments everywhere actively fight that. They constantly increase the money supply, target inflation above zero. They need inflation, partly to manage debt, like we've discussed.
So the money itself is designed to lose value over time.
That's the point. If the system requires the unit of account, the dollar, the euro, whatever, to constantly decay in purchasing power. And that's why assets like stocks and real estate seem to always go up in price over the long run, because the denominator of the currency is shrinking.
Right. It's not always real growth, just monetary debasement.
So the provocative question is, in a world where the money is designed to melt, what asset class, if any, can truly permanently hold its purchasing power? Can anything resist that constant, intentional decay engineered by the system itself?
Is there a true store of value when the measuring stick itself is designed to shrink?
That's the question. It really makes you think about what saving and value preservation even mean in this digital age, especially when even stablecoins are ultimately just another trust us token linked back to that decaying base currency.
Deep thoughts. Definitely something I'm all over. We encourage you to dig into the history here, currency games, the Nixon shock, how private companies sometimes drive national strategy. It's fascinating stuff. Well, that's all the time we have for this deep dive. Thanks for tuning into Cashflow Lab. If this gave you some new perspectives on crypto, debt, and global finance, definitely hit that subscribe button, share it with someone who might find it interesting, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next exploration. See you next time.